she said, "You don't understand," and just like that, everything changed when her hand brushed against mine. The story opens with the young male narrator navigating an ordinary day. Maybe he's at a quiet cafe, browsing the shelves of a bookstore, or walking through a sunlit park. Everything seems mundane until he notices her, a woman in her early 40s, poised and graceful, moving through the space with a quiet confidence that immediately captures his attention. She isn't overtly glamorous, but there's a presence about her that makes the world feel slightly sharper, more vibrant. He notices small details first, the way her hair falls just past her shoulders, catching the light when she tucks a loose strand behind her ear, the faint perfume that lingers in the air like a soft memory, the rhythm of her steps, steady but unhurried. Even from a distance, she seems aware of the world, yet also slightly removed, as if she's carrying a private thought that colors her every movement. He is drawn not only to her appearance but to the subtle energy she radiates. She pauses by a display, fingers lightly brushing the edge of a book, or adjusts her coat in a way that makes him notice the quiet elegance in her gestures. There is something in the way she looks around, a momentary hesitation, a fleeting smile that hints at kindness, humor, or unspoken stories, that sparks curiosity in him. When she moves closer, perhaps passing him in a narrow aisle or along a park path, their shoulders brush ever so slightly. It's accidental, fleeting, yet enough to send a tiny shiver of awareness through him. He's hyper-conscious of the warmth of her arm grazing his own, the slight tilt of her body as she navigates the space. In that brief contact, he feels an inexplicable pull, a mixture of curiosity, attraction, and the quiet thrill of noticing someone truly different from anyone he's met before. Her presence lingers even after she's moved on, like a soft echo in the room. He finds himself stealing glances, trying to catch another glimpse without seeming obvious, mentally cataloging her features, her expressions, the way she interacts with her surroundings. There's a tension here, subtle, almost imperceptible, that hints at the possibility of a connection, though neither of them is aware yet of its significance. Emotionally, this moment is all about intrigue and gentle fascination. The narrator experiences a flutter of nervous excitement and a quiet admiration, but also a sense of humility. He is aware that this is someone with her own life, depth, and experiences, far beyond his initial comprehension. It's the spark of curiosity and subtle longing that will carry forward through the story, laying the groundwork for the slow, tender unfolding of their emotional intimacy. By the end of this scene, the audience should feel the magnetic tension between the two characters, grounded in realism and sensory detail, the accidental brush of arms, the quiet observations, the lingering scent, the subtle warmth of her presence. It's not about overt attraction or immediate romance, but about noticing, being affected, and sensing the possibility of something quietly profound. After the first encounter, the narrator can't stop thinking about her. There's a magnetic pull he doesn't fully understand yet, and chance seems to conspire to bring them together again. Perhaps it's the same cafe a few days later, or a quiet corner in the bookstore where he notices her reaching for the same book he was about to pick up. The collision of these small moments feels accidental, yet charged with unspoken potential. This time, they exchange words, brief, careful, and slightly awkward at first. He notices how her eyes soften when she realizes he's sincere, the way her lips curve into a subtle smile when she laughs at his slightly clumsy attempt at humor. There's a warmth in her tone, a rhythm to her voice that feels unexpectedly comforting. She doesn't dominate the conversation. Instead, she invites him in, allowing him a small window into her world without revealing too much. She shows a trace of vulnerability that catches him off guard. Maybe she sighs quietly when explaining a minor frustration, or admits something personal with a hesitant glance toward him, as if testing whether he's someone she can trust. His heart stirs at the thought that beneath her confident exterior, there's a layer of humanity, a real person with quiet fears and hopes. He feels both protective and intrigued, aware that these small revelations are rare and precious. Physical cues deepen the subtle intimacy. As she reaches for a cup of coffee or a book, her hand brushes his ever so lightly. The contact is brief, almost accidental, but it leaves a lingering warmth in his chest. He notices the softness of her movements, the way her shoulders shift slightly as she leans forward, the faint pressure of her presence when their arms pass near each other. Every small touch feels amplified, carrying a weight that neither of them yet fully names. Emotionally, this is a turning point. He begins to recognize the thrill of connection beyond mere attraction. There's curiosity, empathy, and a desire to understand her on a deeper level. She, in turn, shows subtle signs of acknowledgement, a fleeting glance, a slight hesitation before she leaves, or the way her eyes meet his and hold just a little longer than necessary. These moments are carefully balanced, creating a tension that's both tender and charged, hinting at future intimacy without rushing toward it. The scene ends with them parting, each carrying a quiet awareness of the other. The narrator is left replaying the conversation in his mind, remembering her laugh, the way her hand brushed his, and the softness in her eyes when she revealed even a small vulnerability. He feels a mix of exhilaration and longing, an emotional resonance that will grow steadily in the story, forming the foundation for trust, closeness, and eventual romantic connection. By the end of this keynote, the audience should sense the beginning of a true bond, a connection built not on dramatic gestures or overt romance, but on attentive observation, shared vulnerability, and subtle, meaningful contact. The slow burn tension continues to grow, grounded in sensory detail and emotionally authentic interactions. In the days following their initial conversation, the narrator finds himself noticing her in ways that surprise him. It isn't just that she exists in the same spaces, it's the subtle imprint she leaves on his thoughts, and the quiet pull of her presence in his life. Every time he glimpses her, at the cafe, walking along the same street, or passing by in a bookstore aisle, he feels a mix of anticipation and quiet reverence. She's become a puzzle he wants to understand, a presence that sparks awareness in his ordinary world. Their interactions are still brief and understated, but each encounter feels charged with unspoken significance. Perhaps they exchange a few words about a shared interest, or she offers a polite smile that lingers just long enough for him to feel noticed. These small gestures matter more than he expects, the tilt of her head when she listens, the slight narrowing of her eyes when she considers something seriously, or the gentle lift of her hand in greeting. Every detail makes her feel more real, more layered, and irresistibly intriguing. Physical presence continues to heighten the tension. He senses the warmth of her body as she moves past him in tight spaces, the brief brush of her sleeve against his arm, or the accidental closeness when they reach for the same item. These fleeting touches are electric in their subtlety. They don't cross any boundary, yet they leave a tangible sense of awareness and longing. Even a glance across a room carries weight, a silent acknowledgement of mutual recognition that neither fully names. Emotionally, the narrator experiences a mix of curiosity and restraint. He wants to engage more, to learn her story, yet he is aware of the quiet distance she maintains. This awareness only makes her more magnetic. There's a sense that she carries experiences and depth he can't immediately access, and he finds himself observing not just her actions, but the small rhythms and nuances that make her unique. The way she tilts her cup when thinking, how her fingers play absent-mindedly with a ring or bracelet, the soft exhalation of breath when she smiles to herself. For her part, she seems subtly aware of him too. Perhaps she hesitates when passing him, offers a fleeting nod, or her eyes briefly meet his across a crowded space. These small signs of acknowledgement create an understated tension, a quiet dance of mutual curiosity and interest that neither addresses directly. By the end of this keynote, the audience should feel the slow accumulation of attraction and emotional tension. This is not a dramatic turning point, it is the quiet, persistent pull of noticing, of being noticed, and of sensing that a connection is forming. The narrator's fascination grows not from any overt gesture or declaration, but from observing her presence, the nuances of her behavior, and the subtle ways she affects his own awareness. The story continues to build its slow burn rhythm, laying the groundwork for deeper emotional intimacy in the coming parts. By now, the narrator and the woman have become familiar to each other in subtle ways, yet the depth of their connection remains untested. One day, they find themselves in a situation that forces them to interact more directly. Perhaps it's a conversation sparked by a misunderstanding, a difference of opinion, or a small accidental inconvenience, a misread comment, a bumped shoulder, or a delayed response in a shared space. As they talk, the narrator tries to explain himself, eager to clarify, but she reacts with a mix of frustration and vulnerability. She interrupts softly but firmly, her voice carrying the weight of someone who has lived long enough to be protective of herself. "You don't understand." The words are not harsh, but they resonate like a sudden chord in his chest. He pauses, aware of the tension that has just entered the space between them. Her physical presence during this moment amplifies the emotional charge. She leans slightly toward him as she speaks, as if to bridge the gap, yet her body retains a careful distance, a subtle push and pull that mirrors her words. The slight brush of her hand against his forearm as she gestures is electric, drawing his attention to the warmth of her skin and the steadiness of her movements. Her gaze is direct, searching his eyes for recognition, for understanding that he doesn't yet fully possess. Emotionally, this moment is pivotal. The narrator experiences a rush of empathy and confusion. He wants to reach her, to convey that he does care, yet he is acutely aware that her life and experiences are more layered than he can immediately comprehend. His own hesitation, a mixture of caution and growing fascination, mirrors the subtle vulnerability she has allowed to show. The tension is delicate, almost tender, and it leaves both of them quietly aware of each other in a new, deeper way. Sensory details heighten the intimacy without crossing boundaries. He notices the soft inflection of her voice when she emphasizes certain words, the subtle way her hair brushes against her shoulder as she moves, the warmth that seems to radiate from her as she gestures. Even the faint scent of her perfume seems more pronounced in this charged moment, embedding itself into his memory. The brush of her fingers on his arm, accidental yet lingering just slightly, is enough to leave him alert and acutely aware of her presence. By the end of this scene, the audience should feel both the tension of misunderstanding and the undercurrent of attraction. Their connection has deepened, not through agreement or ease, but through the friction of honest emotion. The line, "You don't understand," becomes symbolic of both the age gap and the difference in lived experience, creating a compelling barrier that will need to be navigated carefully in the slow burn romance to follow. The story at this stage emphasizes subtle conflict as a form of intimacy. The friction between them allows for emotional depth, vulnerability, and heightened awareness, all of which set the stage for the next chapter, where physical closeness and unspoken desire begin to emerge. After the tension of their first real exchange, the narrator begins to notice her presence in a new, more immediate way. Their interactions are no longer just fleeting glances or casual conversation. The world seems to conspire to bring them closer, often in ways that feel almost accidental. Perhaps it's in a crowded bookstore aisle, a busy cafe, or a narrow sidewalk where their paths cross once again. In one such moment, she moves past him, and her body brushes against his. It's a fleeting contact, a sleeve grazing his arm, her shoulder momentarily pressing against his, yet the effect is electric. The narrator feels a rush of awareness, a pulse of warmth that lingers long after the contact ends. He notices the soft pressure of her movement, the subtle shift of her weight, the way her presence occupies the space around him. It's intimate without being deliberate, charged without being overt. The tension in this moment is heightened by their mutual awareness. Neither speaks at first. Both sense the gravity of the simple touch, and it hangs between them like a quiet promise. He notices how she adjusts her posture slightly afterward, almost as if testing whether he felt it too, or wondering if the closeness unsettled him. Her fingers may brush against the edge of his hand as she moves past, leaving a lingering impression of warmth and texture, the memory of skin and movement. Emotionally, this is a turning point in their relationship. The narrator is acutely aware of his own heartbeat, the fluttering excitement and hesitation that comes with such proximity. There's an almost dizzying awareness of her as a living, breathing presence, someone who is both fully herself and quietly aware of him. For her, too, the moment is significant. Her brief touch and lingering proximity suggest a willingness to be close, even if only for a heartbeat. Sensory details enrich the intimacy. He catches a faint whiff of her perfume, subtle but familiar now, mingling with the crisp air of the space around them. The warmth of her body so near, the soft rustle of her coat or clothing as she moves, and the gentle cadence of her breathing create a layered experience that goes beyond words. Even the sound of her soft exhalation as she navigates the space draws his attention, grounding him in the moment. The scene emphasizes the emotional and physical tension without crossing any boundaries. It's not a romantic gesture in the conventional sense. No hands are held, no lips are brushed, yet the connection is undeniable. This is intimacy in its purest, YouTube-safe form: awareness, presence, subtle touch, and the shared recognition of unspoken feelings. By the end of this keynote, the audience should feel the heightened magnetic pull between the two characters. The simple act of brushing against each other becomes a narrative device to deepen attraction, intensify curiosity, and lay the groundwork for emotional vulnerability to follow. The slow burn tension is now both physical and emotional, building toward the next part where they begin to open up about deeper feelings. After the subtle physical closeness of their recent encounters, the story shifts to emotional intimacy. The narrator and the woman find themselves in a quiet, private setting, perhaps a late evening walk under softly lit streets, sitting on a secluded park bench, or lingering after an event in a dimly lit cafe. The world around them feels hushed, creating a safe space where honest conversation can unfold. The moment begins with small talk, almost a prelude to deeper revelations. He notices the way her voice softens as the conversation drifts from casual topics to more personal reflections. She reveals, in gentle tones, aspects of her life she normally keeps private: a recent disappointment, a quiet fear, or a memory that surfaces unexpectedly. It's not dramatic confession, it's the subtle sharing of vulnerability that comes from a sense of trust forming between them. Physical cues reinforce the emotional intimacy. She may rest her hand lightly near his on the bench, or her shoulder brushes his as they walk side by side. These touches are deliberate yet gentle, conveying reassurance and connection without forcing intimacy. He notices the warmth of her presence, the subtle rise and fall of her breathing, and the way her gaze briefly meets his with an unspoken plea for understanding. Each glance, each minimal touch, carries layers of meaning that words alone cannot convey. Emotionally, the narrator feels a deepening responsibility and empathy. He listens carefully, his heart sensitive to her tones, her pauses, and the subtle tremors in her expressions. He responds with attentiveness, allowing silence to fill spaces where words might feel insufficient. There's a balance of give and take. She allows herself to be seen, and he provides a quiet, steady presence in return. The connection feels mutual, honest, and remarkably grounding. Sensory details heighten the intimacy. He smells the familiar, comforting trace of her perfume mingling with the cool evening air. The faint brush of her sleeve against his arm, or the slight warmth when she leans closer during a pause lingers in his awareness. The soft rustle of her movements, the way her hair catches the light, and the subtle cadence of her voice create an atmosphere of quiet trust and closeness. This moment is pivotal because it moves beyond curiosity and physical tension into genuine emotional resonance. The narrator begins to understand her complexity, her confidence, her vulnerability, and her quiet yearning for connection, while she senses his sincerity and care. The age gap, while acknowledged, fades into the background, replaced by a recognition of shared humanity and emotional depth. By the end of this keynote, the audience should feel the quiet transformation in their relationship. The slow burn tension has matured into mutual vulnerability, emotional resonance, and trust. They are no longer merely aware of each other's presence, they are attuned to each other's inner worlds. This chapter lays the foundation for the story's warm resolution in the next part, where emotional intimacy seamlessly blends with tender, YouTube-safe physical closeness. After the emotional vulnerability and subtle tension that has built over the story, the final chapter shifts into a moment of gentle, heartfelt resolution. The narrator and the woman find themselves alone in a peaceful, quiet setting, perhaps a park at dusk, a cozy corner of a cafe, or a quiet street lined with softly glowing lights. The atmosphere is calm, allowing both of them to feel present and fully aware of each other without distraction. The scene begins with quiet, natural interaction. They sit or walk side by side, comfortable in each other's presence. The narrator notices the graceful way she moves, the warmth of her hand near his as they share a moment of laughter, or the subtle way her shoulder brushes against his when she leans slightly to speak. These small gestures are intimate, yet YouTube safe. A hand on the shoulder, a light touch on the back, or brushing hair gently from her face. Emotionally, the moment is filled with acknowledgement and mutual understanding. They don't need to articulate everything. The story has already conveyed the depth of their connection through glances, gestures, and shared silences. The narrator feels a quiet reassurance in her presence, a sense that despite the age gap and the social uncertainties they may face, their emotional bond is real and grounding. She, in turn, allows herself to lean into his steadiness, resting briefly near his shoulder or offering a soft, lingering smile. Sensory details enrich the intimacy of the scene. The warmth of her body next to his, the gentle pressure of her hand as it brushes against his arm, and the soft rhythm of her breathing create a tangible sense of closeness. He notices the familiar, comforting trace of her perfume, the subtle glint of her eyes in the soft light, and the cadence of her voice as it flows easily in conversation. Every detail feels heightened because it carries the weight of their shared experiences, the awkward first encounters, the misunderstandings, the fleeting touches, and the emotional confessions that have led them here. The resolution emphasizes quiet joy and emotional fulfillment rather than dramatic declarations. Perhaps they share a gentle, supportive touch, a hand lingering on a shoulder, a warm brush of fingers as they part momentarily, or a shared laugh that softens the lingering tension. There's a sense of completeness. The slow-burn tension has blossomed into a serene intimacy where both characters feel seen, valued, and connected. By the end of the scene, the audience should feel the full arc of the story. Curiosity and fascination have evolved into emotional vulnerability, subtle physical tension, and finally, warm acceptance. The age difference is acknowledged but no longer a barrier. Instead, it enriches the story's depth, showing a relationship built on respect, empathy, and genuine affection. The final image leaves the viewer with a sense of calm satisfaction. Two people, emotionally attuned and quietly in sync, sharing a moment of human connection that is tender, meaningful, and beautifully slow in its development. The story closes fully, with hearts warmed and tension resolved, offering a YouTube-safe, emotionally resonant ending that lingers long after the scene fades.